What's up, guys? Welcome back to Storytime with Uncle Jon, where we pluck stories from Reddit and around the web that interest me, you, and, like I said, at least a few other people. In the past few episodes, we've been trying a little experiment where, I ask you guys, what kind of stories do you like to hear from what subreddits? And you've thrown out quite a bit. I'm going back to an old faithful today. Today is going to be Malicious Compliance stories, but we're going to throw in a few oddballs here and there, maybe try some HOA stuff, tree law stuff. Tales from the front desk. We haven't done any of those in a while. That it used to be semi-regular, so I may try to throw those in, and that way we've got a little bit of content we can throw in to mix things up a little bit when the other ones are slow. Tales from Tech Support's still a little slow. There was probably enough to do one episode, but not much else, so I'd rather kind of hold that in reserve for now. Do an episode at the end of the week or the beginning of next week and see kind of how it goes. Anyway, quick plug for myself, nothing major, just, here's the link to the website. If you like handmade soaps, bath stuff, beard care, traditional wet shaving, things like that, go ahead and visit the website and help support the channel. Maybe I can start backing off on the YouTube goofy ads that really have no bearing on this channel at all. Anyway, we'll post the link again at the end of the video and stop talking about it now. All right, let's do the stories. Planning permission? What planning permission? This is not my story, but one from another family member, Steve. I live in the UK and he lives in Canada. Around 10 years ago, I flew over to see my Canadian family, and whilst I was there, was surprised to see that Steve was living in an RV with his wife. When I previously visited, he had been living in a 3-story house, basement, ground, and first floor. On this occasion, his house appeared to be on stilts. The entire thing had been raised up by around 2.5 meters, whilst the ground underneath had been excavated, leaving nothing more than a big hole in the ground. I couldn't not ask why his house was hovering precariously above the ground on nothing more than a dozen metal supports. It emerges that he had sought for planning permission to add an extra floor to his house. Despite literally living miles away from the nearest neighbor, his permission was rejected. He was, however, informed that should he wish to expand his house, he could install a basement and didn't require planning permission. Really? That's kind of weird. Being the extremely handy and resourceful fellow that he is, he had the bright idea to jack the property up and install a new basement below the existing basement. In essence, the old basement now became the ground floor. That's weird, not sure how that works structurally, but anyway. I visited 5 years later and the work was completed. I asked him if he'd ever had any issues from the planning department. He told me that they sent someone out, but given that there was nothing in the rules preventing a house from being raised by a floor through being jacked up and built under, no action was taken. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Most basements in North America are built with either stone, brick, masonry of some sort, poured concrete foundation, things like that. That is the foundation of your house, and usually is at least partially submerged into the ground, and then the rest of the house is built on top of that. Now, for us here in the States, the basement would be the basement, the floor at ground level or just above ground level would be your first floor, and then your second floor where most of the bedrooms and things are. How do you jack up a house with the basement and then build under that? That's what I'm trying to figure out. How do you build like a 2-story basement with an existing basement in place? If you know, or if OP's listening, can you explain this to me? Because I'm befuddled here. Now, if you have a 3-story house that was sitting on a crawl space and you wanted a basement down below, that's fine. You could jack that house up and then put your, masonry and things below that, but I'm not sure how the other thing would work. Anyway, yeah, planning councils and planning and zoning commissions and whatever, permitting departments, they're all so screwy. Most of the time, they take forever to make a decision. Usually by then, you're too old to do anything to your house. And, as much as I like to follow the rules, sometimes, mostly with smaller stuff, it's better just to ask permission and pay a couple fines than to wait 10 years for an actual decision to be made. Mind you, I'm not recommending you run out and break the law, but, sometimes you got to do what you got to do with small things that aren't going to hurt anybody, if it's not done exactly to specs. Structural things, yeah, for sure, you got to wait on those, so, Don't throw rank on a tournament against high schoolers. You might get malicious compliance. Picture this. High school, computer education class. Computer education class consisted for 3 years, 13 to 15-year-olds in Sinclair Spectrum computers running Logo software for programming. Then school finally upgrades hardware. We get 486 PCs with DOS, Windows 3.1, and color monitors. Ooh. A whole new world for kids 16 and 17 years old. Professor is early 30s, very serious about his craft. Cool guy once you get to know him. The aide, a former student that thinks he's the bee's knees and everyone should adore him. He's just somebody that likes to micro-bully people, but harmless because he has no real power. All power comes from the professor. Class is being taught in a long, narrow rectangular room. Only windows are to a large patio. No windows to the hall. Around 12 to 14 computers, each with its own desk. 2 kids per computer. The first desk on one end of the room near the door being the teacher's computer. Kids being kids, we bootleg copies of video games to play on the farthest side computers since computers are really expensive and you're really lucky if you have one that good at home. Mostly football and soccer games. We sometimes get caught, sometimes get sent out of class for the day and given a speech, but that's it, since my class is comprised of above average students. So the day before last, Professor says, guys, since pretty much all of you have passed, tomorrow, last day of class, we're having a striker tournament. It's a soccer game, about 6-minute games, very fast paced, popular back in the day. Aid and myself will compete, and all of you will as well. Bring chips, bring something to drink, non-alcoholic of course, and may the best player win. The tournament starts. Semifinals end up being me against Aid and one friend against Professor. Before the games, both Aid and Professor approach us very seriously and tell us, may the best player win, but if you beat us, we might fail you. Me and my friend laugh. They don't. I'm not about calling his bluff and risk problems. I choose Trinidad and Tobago. Very bad team. Aid chooses Brazil. Best team on the game. My friend goes with some mid-team. I don't remember. Professor chooses Argentina. Another very good team. All the other students, already out of the tournament, gather around the remaining 2 computers to watch the games. Halftime, Aid is beating me 3-0. Professor's beating my friend 4-0. Aid says with a satisfaction smirk on his face, come on guys, we're bluffing. Do your best to beat us. This is not entertaining anymore. But he doesn't know one thing. 4 of us spend around 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 4 times a week playing the game. We know every single trick, everything there is to know about the game. They're beating us because we're afraid they might pull rank. I say to the aide, but you won't fail us, right? Oh no, do your absolute best. I look at my friend, he smirks maliciously, I smile, we say okay, and proceed to comply. Big time. The games ended 3-11 and 4-12. Aid almost breaks the keyboard. The rest of the students are going nuts. Professor takes it like a champ. My friend beats me in the finals. Nobody cares anymore. To this day, I still don't know how nobody came to the room to say something about the noise. It was a perfect way to end high school. I think it's funny that the professor, and the aide were bluffing. I believe the professor was bluffing. Like, he was just yanking your chain. The aide, he seemed to take his game pretty seriously and really didn't like the fact that he was getting beat. So I will never, ever, ever challenge a younger person than myself to pretty much any video game. Now, if I could go hook up my old Atari, my old, Nintendo game and, play some Pac-Man, some Space Invaders, some whatever, on whatever system, sure, I'll challenge them then. I could probably whoop their ass still. There's a lot of things I remember from those games that, the directions, I remember the exact paths around Pac-Man. The one in the arcade was totally different than the one on the home system. It was wild, but, it's funny, all the things you remember and then all the things you forget when you get older. It's a fun time, kids. Couldn't demolish, but could renovate. Oh, this sounds like the other story. I was reminded of this story by another post today. There was a house in my town that was vacant and in really bad shape. The planning department considered it a landmark and therefore they wouldn't allow demolition, but only interior renovation. So the owner began renovating by removing all interior walls and all upper story windows. Then they mysteriously had some cash flow problems and work stopped. Eventually we had a bad storm and the entire structure came down. No permits are needed to clean up storm damage, so problem solved. Vacant land is now usable. Oh dear. So, oh my God. There's always a loophole. I don't care what you say. There's always going to be a loophole somewhere that somebody will see and interpret the right way and take advantage of. And, basically it's just that's an FU for those of you that didn't see the gesture I was doing. Anyway, I'm not sure I would have had the heart to do it unless the house was in that bad a shape. But, it gives me some ideas. Just kidding. Parking payment compliance. This was quite a few years ago. I worked downtown where there wasn't any long-term parking within 2 blocks of my building. There were 2-hour meters I would use for short stops at the office maybe 3 or 4 times a week. Inevitably, once a month or so, I would get a ticket because something came up at the office and I couldn't get back to my car in time. The tickets are only $15. The cat's laying here dreaming. It looks like he's fighting something. Oh my god, sorry about that. The tickets are only $15, but you only have a week to pay, and then it would be $45. At the time, there was no option for online or web payment, so a check had to be mailed in. Most of the time I would get it paid in time, but I hated it when the fee would triple. I basically just considered this the cost of doing business downtown. I was also very frustrated that there was such short time frame for payment and response on my part. But most interactions from the city took months for the city to respond to or resolve. My job involved working with the city regularly. I had previously asked if I could just set up an account and keep a running balance, but they said no. Of course they said no. After about 5 years of this, I decided to set up an auto bill pay with my 2 vehicle license plates in the memo line, and it would send every 2 weeks to ensure that if I accidentally got 2 in a month, I was covered. Never again would I have to pay the $45. I guess this caused quite the headache for the parking department. After about 4 months of automatic bill payments, and them sending me back the checks that I didn't have any ticket to apply, I got a phone call requesting that I stop as it required a lot of research on their part and a commissioner had to sign for each check they had to send back. I asked again if I could have an ongoing account to avoid the accidental $45 fee, and they said I could not, so I continued sending them automatic payments for about 3 years after that until I changed jobs. Want to make my life more difficult? No problem. Now we can both do extra work. I used to hate getting junk magazines and stuff like that. Unsolicited junk mail, basically. And what I would do, and I learned this from somebody else a long time ago, in a lot of magazines, the ones that you don't want, usually there's a postcard in it, with free postage, send this back for whatever. If you flip through the magazine, it would usually fall out. And I would usually take that postage and I would collect junk mail and then send it back to the companies and just inundate them with junk mail, basically. Recycled junk mail at that. Most of them got the hint and would stop sending me stuff after a while, but there was a few diehards that just had no idea what the hell was going on and just kept sending stuff anyway, so those were the ones I ended up putting all my energy into and repeatedly sending stuff back with free postage. And wasn't hurting me any. I mean, I always had extra boxes sitting around anyway, so I'd box up a bunch of junk mail and send it back. It's my job to deal with it? Sure. I work in public services. It was a new role, and I'm the first and only one of me. Essentially, this means that my job scope can be pretty much broad, and I have a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies. I've also gained the reputation of a no-nonsense problem solver. I cannot for the life of me think why. So when people have issues, they tend to come to me. I was busily hashing out a few tasks last week when I get something else slapped onto my plate. A manager of a service we commission with, appropriately named Karen, has apparently been working her way through people because she isn't getting the resolution she wants. So one of the managers in finance wants me to look into this for Karen. Now, a thing to note here is that every April we get increased rates with inflation, but she didn't get it. Thing is, it's out of our hands. The services we commission from her are funded between us and another separate public service, PS2. We pay half, PS2 pays half, but we haven't paid the increase because PS2 hasn't agreed to anything yet. What can I say? It's the public sector. Our team's conversation goes something like this. I say, hey, finance manager, I can't actually do anything about this because... Finance manager, cutting me off, says, this is your job. It's your department that deals with these contracts, so deal with it. I don't care how, just get her off my back. Now that's mostly paraphrased, except for that last sentence, which he said verbatim. I don't care how, just get her off my back. I write in chat to confirm I am to deal with this and you don't care how. Finance manager says, yes, for Christ's sake. I crack my knuckles and get to work, sending her the following email and CCing in finance manager and my own manager. Dear Karen, I apologize for the delay in inflationary increase for our service. However, at this point, jointly funded between ourselves and PS2, we are beholden to their financial timeliness. As PS2 have not yet agreed to the 4.1% increase, we're unable to process it. Regardless of how many individuals you contact, this will remain the case until PS2 sees fit to approve. In instances such as these, our record should be to head down to the offices of PS2 and begin smacking naughty bottoms, but I fear HR would frown upon such action in these enlightened times. Might I suggest contacting PS2 yourself in order to expedite the process? I'm sure finance manager, finance.manager@myplaceofwork, would be happy to direct you to the appropriate contact and answer any further questions. Warmest regards, me. I then immediately got a Teams call from my manager where for 30 seconds all I could hear was laughing, and he asked me what was going on. I sent him the screenshots of the chat messages between myself and finance manager and relayed the Teams call. My manager told me that it was not, in fact, my job. How odd. And later that day, finance manager apologized, but also warned me that in the future you should probably hold back on the bollock withering sarcasm. People might not find it amusing. I think I'm hysterical personally. That was the perfect response, and finance manager should have known as soon as you, in writing, because you were having a typed chat, as soon as you wanted to confirm in writing that that's what they said, no matter what, are you sure? And they say yes, well, he should have questioned that right away. Wait a minute, let me think this through. Let's come up with a plan, especially when you're putting off, your job to somebody else, and, sometimes you get screwed in the end. I'm wondering how Karen took it and what her response was. That's what I really want to see. Everyone quit at once. This isn't my story, it's my sister's experience, but I thought it was appropriate to share here. My sister works for a bank and she's really good at her job. Her boss is apparently awful. She had no remorse for anyone's schedule, was rude AF to everyone, and a generally shit person from my understanding. In corporate world, your brand is everything. Well, my sister told me she was the only person aside from her boss to be working. I asked her why, and what she told me had me rooting for her coworkers, and I don't even work there. Everyone quit at once. Literally, everyone. So now her boss needed to explain to her own boss why everyone quit. She started crying and asked my sister what she could do differently. So my sister told her. My sister will tell you like it is, too. She basically told her that she only stayed because of the time she had already put into the company. This was teamwork at its finest. I think I've only ever been in one company where everybody walked off at the same exact time for the same exact reason, a shit manager. People don't quit jobs, they quit bad management, of course. This was on a construction site, and the foreman on site was just awful. Same kind of guy. He didn't care about your schedule, your family life. I understand his job was to produce, keep budgets in check and things like that, make sure everybody showed up and was doing quality work and things like that, but you don't treat people like garbage and then expect them to actually produce anything for you. It just doesn't work. And we had been warning, the whole crew, had been warning the upper boss for, 4 or 5 months at least. And then one day it was bitter cold outside. Everybody was already achy and, you can't, this is before we really started using nail guns like religiously. We were still hand driving tons of nails, whether it was framing, sheathing, whatever. Hand driving nails in the wintertime, especially if you ever whack your thumb when it's cold like that, because you don't feel it. You tend to hit it harder and split it wide open, and that cold, and when you thaw out next to the fire that we had or go inside, man, it just throbs for days. Anyway, bitter cold, we were already cranky and just weren't up for any of his BS, so we all had coffee break around 9:15 a.m. and he had gone to his truck for something. And we all started discussing and looking at each other like, I'm ready to go home. What about you? Everybody said that they were ready to go home too. So we all finished our coffee, threw the cups in the fire, and packed our shit and went home. He tried blocking vehicles. He tried threatening people. We told him it'd be a shame to get your ass kicked on top of losing your entire crew. So you better get out of the way. I got a 20-year-old pickup truck that's worth about $150. I'll kill us both with this truck, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, needless to say, none of us ever looked back. This guy lost his job. The building was put behind schedule by about 2 or 3 weeks. No big deal. The big boss finally filled the holes. And, life went on. What are you going to do? Nobody passed the yellow line? Gotcha. It's going to sound like it's fairly reasonable to start, but trust me, it gets silly real quick. I had just started work at one of the big railway companies as a safety officer / customer service rep. Now, as you can imagine, that's basically like herding sheep and not very effectively. People have places to go, but I'd rather they didn't end up dead. During probation, one of the bosses got moved to my station. Now, this guy could not have fit the police description of up his boss's arse more if he'd tried. Looked like he spent the last 40 years dreaming of having a badge on with significance, and by God, he was going to use it. On the platform of every station, there's a yellow line on the floor, few feet from the edge, to signify where not to walk, lest the turbulence turns you into a train's doormat. Simple stuff, and when the train is pulling up, you're to keep everyone behind it. No issue so far, that's literally my job. Now for weeks he'd been a stickler for his way, but he would mask it as this came from head office. But on this particular day, whatever bee was in his bonnet came out in full force and he was masking nothing. Once the train was stopped, so long as you don't have a full gaggle at the door, we usually had no issues with one or two people, the London crowd who won't wait, being next to the door ready. It's efficient if nothing else. The train had stopped. 3 people were waiting for the doors to open. They did, and the train left. This guy starts shouting from literally the other platform in front of the other travelers, roasting the crap out of me. Safety, yes, but this was obscene. So he decided to enact a rule of his own. If you want to pass his probation, I want to see everyone behind that yellow line for a full 30 seconds before you signal to let the doors open. If a single person moves, you talk to them about safety and wait again. So let me get this straight. That 30 seconds resets for every time someone else doesn't listen and crosses the line? Did I stutter? Did you effing what? Oh, you're on, sweet child. Across that day, I was honestly looking at my watch more than I was anything else. Remember, it's for your safety after all. Plot twist? Dual line station. One into the city and one on the way to London. No way past it. If a train is delayed, nothing else moves. Cue about 2 hours later, and sure enough, the dweeb-ass manager comes charging down the platform. What the hell are all these delays for? I've got head office tearing us a new one. Well, just making sure we adhere to the 30 seconds, boss. I've never had so much feedback about safety. Well, the feedback I'm getting is now we have a near 10 train bottleneck at this station. Firstly, it's you have a bottleneck, not us. Second, I'm merely doing exactly as you asked. His face dropped, clearly understanding what had happened. Right then, well, you can talk to the area manager and explain this for yourself because he's going to be here in about 15 minutes. He's coming here? Deal. Did he go as white as a ghost? Yes. Did he try stopping me seeing the area manager? Yes. Was he successful? Hell no. What ensued was maybe a 20-minute conversation between me and the area manager. Me finding out that this manager had been moved more than a few times for various issues. The meeting between them lasted probably 90 seconds, if that. And then a very sheepish-looking manager slowly slinked up to me and in the lowest voice ever said, "You're doing a good job. I trust you to use your judgment with the onboarding process." And then immediately scuttled away. He's moved on since, but apparently it was a personal request this time. Can't imagine why. Give some people just a little bit of power and it goes straight to their head and they just think they can micromanage the shit out of everything. Well, you get what you asked for. I just picture some, stubby little thing. If you remember Thomas the Tank Engine, whatever, Sir Topham Hatt, I picture somebody like that, all puffy chest and everything and all high and mighty. And yeah, I mean, actually Mr. Topham Hatt, I guess, was one of the better bosses that you could have. This guy sounded like just the evil twin, maybe. Anyway, if you like handmade stuff, do me a favor, click this link below, go check it out. Peruse the website, as it were, and maybe pick yourself up some handmade soaps, beard stuff, shave stuff, a little something for the wife, or husband. And until the next video, we'll see ya.